Okay, yeah. So in this one we're gonna make a backend, and so for some context, last time we made a package.json file and a gitignore file, and we pushed to GitHub. So now we have like our starter project ready to rock and roll, which with literally nothing in it besides our gitignore file. So the first thing that we're gonna do is just make a backend or a server, and we're gonna use a JavaScript framework called Express.js. And Express.js is like a it's like pretty old actually. It's been around for a long time. When I started learning how to do this stuff with Node, it was the same. You used it the same way, like, and it was also just as popular. So, and that's not to say, and it being old is not to say that it's not popular, because it still is used almost like it's kind of ubiquitous in how many people use it. Of course, there's like tons of stuff you could use, but it is still very popular and very fast and unopinionated, which is a quote from their website. But one thing to note, though, that it is not, while it is maintained actively, there hasn't been a lot of updates to it. So it's not like a bunch of new stuff's coming out for Express. It's just like something to keep in mind. But I think for our cases, we should just use it because it's awesome and is super straightforward and easy to use. And that's also what I've used in the past. But so.
Sweet. Sounds stable. And then before we dive in, will you just say, how do you think about difference between front end and back end? Should I think of that as things the user interacts with versus doesn't interact with, or how should I conceptualize the difference?
Yeah, totally. So back end, so front end is like your browser and what a user interacts with. So that's when they open a website and they browse around, click around. That's the front end, also called the client. If you're like developer speak, is the client. And that's the front end. That's what the user sees. That's what they interact with. And then the back end is all the stuff that's on your server, or like that the user does not interact with, meaning that so usually a server is on some sort of remote computer, and they send information and receive information from the client or the front end, but the user never gets to see what's going on there. They just get to send and receive to the server.
Cool. So they interact with front end elements, which sort of as a result does send stuff to the server or the back end, and then that will in turn send stuff back to the front end, and they will continue to interact with it. And there's this dance that happens. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're thinking about like a login, for example, like as a user, I would type in my username, type in my password, and then hit send or submit or whatever, and it would send the username and password to the server. The server would get it. It would do some server magic and log the user in, and then send a response saying you're logged in now.
Cool.
But the user never gets to see that magic that's happening.
Let's make some server magic.
Cool. Okay, so we're gonna use Express. So if you want to install Express, you can do yarn add Express, and that will add the Express dependency to our project.
Got it. And just as a reminder, Yarn is my package manager. Yarn install Express says, hey, package manager, go get this package called Express, which we're going to use for this video.
Yep. Do add instead of install. That's just like a npm you use install, but Yarn you use add.
Cool.
They do both do the same thing. And so now if on the package.json, now you'll see a little dependency there of Express. That's awesome. So now we have it sort of in this folder called node modules above. So there are two things that were just changed. Our package.json changed, and it just created a folder called node modules. So if you click on node modules, it's just going to be like a bunch of different libraries and other dependencies that Express depends on. So like, while our project depends on Express needs all this other stuff to function.
So you're telling me when you created Express, or when we created Express, it downloaded a package called node modules?
It created, the package itself is not node modules. That's just a folder. Mm-hmm. But all of those other folders inside node modules are packages.
Got it. And why is node modules new, or did I already have node modules?
It is new, but it's only new because we didn't have any dependencies in our project. Since
Got it.
Express is our first one, then it's like, okay, this is where we're going to store all of the dependencies.
Got it. So that's fascinating. So I installed Express or added Express to use Yarn Speak, and it went and got Express, and because it needed somewhere to put it, it created this folder node modules. And then it said like, well, Express actually involves a lot of packages, and I know because you want Express, you want all of the packages that are required to use Express. So let me give you all of those too, which turns out to be many more packages beyond just Express.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, so if you wanted to confirm this, if you click on Express in there, Express should have its own package.json. So you click on that. And then now you'll see this whole list of dependencies that it has.
And so all the world just did for me, not to belittle what Yarn did, is it said, you want Express, it got it, and then it said, well, I'm going to have to install one by one each of these things. So it's as if it ran yarn add encode URL, yarn add escape HTML.
Yep.
Whatever.
Yep. It just walks the dependency trees and installs everything that you need.
And okay, this is a nuanced question, but imagine a final handler has a dependency that Express doesn't have. Does Express have to be smart enough to add that as a dependency explicitly, or does it like propagate down the tree to then also install dependencies of final handler?
That's like the job of Yarn and NPM because they're package managers, so they manage the dependency trees and make sure that you're not just like installing if you have already installed that through a different dependency, it doesn't, overwrite them or whatever.
Got it. I'm growing appreciation for this because it doesn't sound like a very fun manual task.
Because notice that there's no node modules inside node modules. So there's not like some sort of recursive node modules. That's a flat directory.
It knows you already have this, so don't install. Yeah. Cool. So we've got it and we're ready to rock and roll.
Yep. And one thing about that, since we just installed so much stuff, we don't actually want that in our project. So you should add to your git ignore node modules, and then a / so that will just ignore everything in node modules.
Is that right?
Save, and I think it'll. Yep. There you go. Cool. And then so there is one other thing we created, which was the yarn.lock, and that is sort of a more nuanced version of the package.json. It's it's just keeping track of all of the dependencies and the versions of those dependencies. So with the end goal being that every time you install, you're creating the exact same set of packages. And that's something that we actually do want to commit. So we'll just leave that alone.
Cool. And do you have a sense of, I think I know the answer to this, but let me ask it anyways. Why don't you just add all the node modules and everything to the GitHub repository as opposed to manage them separately and then git ignore them? Is it just a sheer size thing of what belongs on a GitHub repository?
Yeah, and it's like not required since it's all kept. Since you keep track of all of it in package.json and yarn.lock. There's no reason to push and pull larger, because sometimes it does get pretty big once your project or your app or whatever it is gets larger. Like, it can be actually pretty significant.
Cool, that makes sense. And I can click off this. We're not going to sort of play with this. It's an auto-generated thing.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, I think we're ready to make our actual server now. So just make a file in the root called server.js.
And when you make a file in root, would you sort of in your day-to-day flow, would you create that in terminal, or would you go and do like file, new file?
I feel like I do whatever moves me. Sometimes I'll do it in the terminal if I'm there, and you just do like touch, server.js or nanoserver.js. Usually probably just touch, because I think that just makes
let's do that, just because I'm in my web app, and in order to create a text file, I can just do touch server.js, and now it shows up here, and then I can click it. That feels like a better flow than file create. And
there is like a little icon too above your Explorer that has so scroll down, like right above.
Got it
right there. So sometimes I do that too. I don't know.
So there's many ways to peel an onion, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. If you're an elite hacker, then maybe you do the terminal way. But a lot of times I just
clearly we are. We just demonstrate as such.
Cool. So this is like our primary server, and I feel like the best way to do this is just kind of like go through it line by line.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it.
Cool. So first of all, the first thing that we do is we require, or we like import the Express library, and we do that by just saying, okay, we're gonna make a new variable called Express by saying const Express, and then we're gonna require it, which is a Node function. This is like something that Node has, is require. And then you say the string name of the library. So what it's going to do is it's going to look into your Node modules package and find Express, and then put that into the variable Express.
So require creates an instance of Express?
It does not. I mean, I think this might be down, like, I think yes, but semantically, I don't think it does. But for your own, like, it's pulling everything that gets exported out of Express, that folder, and putting it into that variable. So if you really wanted to, you could go into Node modules and then like see what it's doing, and then see like what it's exporting. So basically, it's just like putting everything into that variable.
Can we go see the require code, the function require?
Yeah, sort of. If you, well, that's actually helpful, but
we don't have to if it sort of goes down a rabbit hole.
It is a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Let's save it.
What you should know is that it's taking everything that is exported from that folder that's called Express inside of Node modules, and then putting that into the variable Express.
Got it. That's interesting. So if I just ran this line of code, I would Express literally contains what's in Express. There's a shipment that happens.
Yeah, you can. Let's try it. So go to your terminal.
Yep.
And then type node. And so now you're in your node editor. So yeah, exactly. Just do that.
Double and single quotes matter here?
Does not matter, no. And then so now just type Express. So you can see that this is what that variable now contains, is a huge function.
Interesting. The reason I'm sort of so in R and Python, I'm thinking of require as being like loading a library where nothing actually happens other than like the module sort of fires up to the front of the working environment. Here, it sort of seems like something similar, but not exactly the same is happening, because you're assigning a library into what is a variable in here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, so yeah, now you have access to that library through that variable.
Cool.
Which is exactly what the next line is doing. So the next line, so as you saw in your node editor, it's a function. So we're calling that function in the next line. We're calling Express, open bracket, close bracket means that we're just calling that as a function. And then it's returning a bunch of stuff, and that we're calling that stuff app.
And how should I know what a call to a call with no arguments input between those beautiful parentheses? How should I know what that's going to create? Is that just like, that's how you start Express and you kind of get to know that?
Yeah. Or you read the documentation, or you could definitely do a deep dive on your own and see what it returns exactly. I don't know how insightful that'll be. You're probably best off checking out the documentation and just seeing. But to your point before, now that when you call Express, then we're sort of getting an instance of app. So that's why we have this app equals Express, and we're calling it. If you wanted to do like app2, which would do all the same things as app, but just be a different instance, you do app2 equals Express.
So I was tempted to call Express an instance, but if I insist on that terminology, app is actually the instance. It's the result of one call to the Express module function.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
How fun.
Yep. Very fun. The next line is just we're going to use port 3000 on our local host, and that's just defining that there. And then the next one after that is defining a route for our server, and it's so to define routes with Express, it's pretty easy. All you do is just do app dot and then whatever the route request is. So in here, it's a GET request, which is the same sort of thing as like when you go to a website, that's a GET request. When you're like typing it into a URL, that's a GET request.
Mm-hmm. This is the back and forth between the front and the back, the listening on the front and getting on the back.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. This is what this is saying is that like whenever somebody makes a GET request to your root, because that's the /, it just means like nothing after it. So this would just be like localhost 3000 or mycoolwebsite.com. That would just go straight to here. And so it's listening for that. And when it receives it, then you run the code that's in here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we're listening for a GET request. And then when it hears it or whatever, then it runs this code, which is all it's doing right now is sending a response that says hello world.
And remind me what rock and res stand for. Response.
Yep. It's a shorthand, so we could say request response. That's probably a little more accurate, but it's just a shorthand for request and response. So with every request, we have a request object that has a bunch of information about the request that was made, and then Express also gives you a response object that allows you to do certain things like send hello world.
And what I see here, I'm sort of intrigued by, is the response. What happens in app.get is not at all dependent on request, which means sort of it might listen, but it doesn't. It's going to say hello world no matter what it gets as far as a request. Is that right?
And of course this is the simplest possible example that we could use, but in the real world you would use a lot of information from request.
That we're in hello world as opposed to the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And then, so in app.get, am I reading the syntax right? Again, I'm trying to translate from R and Python. The app.get has two arguments. The first is just a simple /, and then the second argument is this fancy thing, which I'm tempted to call an anonymous function.
Yeah, that's a great attempt, and I think it's an accurate attempt.
Sweet.
It's an arrow function. Which is sort of fancy, but yes, it is anonymous, doesn't have a name. You could also say function, like that would also be that would be perfectly valid.
Could you define the function out? Could you name the function and define it up in line 4 and then use it there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Sweet.
Yep. So you could name it and then just plop that in as the second argument.
Okay. Love it.
But yeah, for the sake of, saving lines, I guess we're just going to throw it in there. But yes, so you're right. So there are two arguments. The first is a string that is the route that we want to target. And then the next is a callback function.
And the route is just like the root, like / just says like here effectively.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So like if you had a website, called google.com, / is just google.com /
Got it.
with nothing else.
And if we were writing something for google.com /maps, we would do a /maps here.
Yep, exactly. Yep, that's all you do.
Word. And then app.listen, you tell it the port, and then you also tell it. So this anonymous function on app.get, I'm writing a function that tells, I guess, what's being gotten. What's the get? It's getting something from the back end to send to the front end.
Yeah. When you mean like why does it say app.get?
Yeah, I'm trying to connect the terminology get and listen, like what's being got, what's being listened to a notion of front end, back end.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there is a little bit of things you have to know about routing and about requests. So get is not an express thing. Like a get request is something that is used, throughout web development. There's also something called like a post request or a delete request or a put request. Like those are used in all sorts of routing, any sort of backend routing. And so what Express did is conveniently named it as such, I guess. So if you want to do a post request, it would look like this. I wouldn't say it's related at all to app.listen in this case. Like app.listen is just another method that app exposes. It's not necessarily like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me define Git. So Git says, what should I get from the back end to send to the user on the front end?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah, I think so. It's like, yeah, that's like sort of how it works. There are different types of requests, and I guess without getting too far into it right now, that's probably a decent definition.
Sweet. Approximately right. It's better than completely wrong. App.listen. So listen, it's saying app listening. I'm assuming I should think of listening as something that the front end does to pay attention to potential user inputs.
Yeah, listen. So listen is saying that now my backend, my server, is listening for any requests that are coming in on the port that you specify, which we said is 3000.
And okay, so maybe the last thing, because you continue to use the word request, which seems perfect. So define what a request and a response is one more time.
So a request could be not any information, but basically any information that is sent from the client to your server. So that's the request. So the client is making a request to your server, and then the client or the server gets that request, right? And then sends a response.
Client is the front end?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Server is the back end?
Yep.
Got it. Client is the browser?
Yeah.
Synonyms.
Client, browser, front end, all the same.
Great. So say it one more time. A request is, yeah.
A request is sent from the client, from the browser, or from the front end to the server or your back end. Mm-hmm. And then your server gets that request.
And responds.
If we're using that terminology, and then sends a response back.
So it makes perfect sense. So you request stuff from the back end, and the back end responds with stuff to the front end, and then you request stuff from the back end, then it sends a response to the front end. Yeah,
that's pretty much how it works.
Complicated things are simple once you really get there.
Yeah, once you get there. So when we run this script, at the end, it'll call app.listen, and then our server will be up. So let's do it.
And I'm super tempted to continue to run line by line, just because it gives me just like I think in chunks, so I respond in chunks. I'm assuming this is not going to get us anywhere to continue to run line by line, even though it was fun.
I think it'll still. So you just did that one. So do the last line. I think it'll start the server up.
Cool.
So now if you go to localhost 3000, should be ready to rock.
And maybe the thing to do is just a command click.
Yeah.
And I can pull it over. And there it is.
Yeah, so very basic, but what we're seeing, we said response.send hello world. So it's literally just sending the string hello world. And that's our website right now.
Cool.
When you sort of just to wrap your head around it, what we'll end up sending to the client later is a lot of stuff. Everything you see on a website was sent from the server. And it could be a whole lot of stuff, but
got it. So what needs to be sent back is what little picture to show in the top right for that, what state to have in that, what how many points LeBron James scored for the box score,
Yep. Yeah, like and a lot of times that, or well, all the times that's in the form of HTML, right? So like if you sent this instead, it would give you a header tag that says hello world, so it would probably be a little bigger than it was before.
Let's keep pushing on the terminal because I think it's super interesting. So it says example app listening. Where's it getting the name example?
Example. So you put that
right
into
here.
your string. Yep.
So let me just my man Tanner's app, and then
Yeah. So
can I like stop this from listening? So
I think you'll have to exit. So why don't you exit that node
you got me a
instance
function.
that you have? Or sorry, Control C a couple times.
Got it. So I'm back, and then I can fire up Node once again, and then now just because
Yeah.
this has always been my thing, I'm an interactive guy. It says Tanner's app is listening, and if I pull this back over, we've got a much larger, we've got a prettier looking hello world.
Yep. And then
More
so
pleasing hello world.
everything beyond that is just styling your page, adding more HTML, adding more interactivity with JavaScript, but that's sort of the primary concept behind it, is that you're sending a bunch of stuff to the user, and then that stuff is made into a website.
And I'm sure we're gonna get there, but it seems to me like if you're gonna respond with everything that's required to make a website, it's gonna get pretty hairy. Are there like some special helper functions and packages that help you synthesize this HTML in a way that's like modularized and not just this really hairy long string that goes a million miles to the right?
Yeah. Yep. Short answer is there are 5 billion packages that help you do that stuff. And
what do I call one of those tools?
So a lot of them are called front end frameworks.
Okay.
That's sort of the the best and worst part about JavaScript is that there are so many tools to use, and so many different frameworks and everything. The one that we're going to end up using is React, and that is handling a lot of the actual front end, how the website works.
It's almost an embarrassment of riches, all the different options.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then maybe what we should do. So, and when I do Control C here, I'm just like exiting out of that node environment, and then I've got to go back in with another node. But show me how you would run. How would you run this usually? The gurus aren't loading up terminal and then copying and pasting. What do I do here to execute or to run?
Yep. Just to execute, you can just do node server, or you can actually leave out the JS, but you could do node server.js. Either of that would work.
So if I run down here, node server.js, it says, before I was enter a node environment or enter a node IDE, or I don't know what the term is. But now I'm just saying node execute this JavaScript script.
So same thing, you get the console log.
Oh, but you see,
apps.
this is a classic. So
you didn't save.
It says example app. But I have Tanner here because I didn't save or something.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so let's get out of here. Tanner's app, and then love changing it to something so that we can see. So we hadn't saved before. So now we're getting both the new header and we're getting the again.
Yep.
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, that's it. That's
our
server.
So now I've got a server. I've got a server up and running. I've got. It's always going to respond with "Hello World" again, no matter what the request is, because there's no request here. It's listening, and it seems to me like this line of code doesn't even matter. This is just nice and helpful that it prints something, but we could delete this and it would work just as well. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah. You don't need a callback function there. It's just something to let you know that the server is up.
So when things get crazy, will this function get wild, but this function will stay very vanilla, or do both functions get large?
The latter, the app.listen, might not change at all.
Sweet.
In my app, it is literally says the same thing that it said.
Or
when I
maybe a
first
ton
made
of
it.
console logging for debugging and stuff.
Maybe, but it's only run when the app starts. So like,
Mm.
I'm sure there's plenty of use cases out there where you would log some important stuff. In my experience, it hasn't changed that much.
Cool.
So
I love it. So we're good.
we're good. Nice job.
Sweet. Cut.